Sales professionals, by and large, suck at sales because most of their sales training sucks. They've been trained by garbage, outdated stuff when consumers couldn't go online. I believe there's a better way to do it. And I love salespeople. You are the athletes of the business world. Your performance matters. You matter to companies. You move the economy. You are what drives revenue. You should be celebrated, not hated. The reason you're hated and considered like the sleazy car salesman is because of your stupid tactics and forcing people to do something they don't want to do. And I am not considered that way because I help you make your decision. So I don't identify with that. And if you don't want to either, reach out to us because I believe this so firmly that sales is a noble profession. It's helping people. It's guiding them to help. And so many professionals do it wrong. Welcome to the Close More Sales podcast. For today's episode, we're going to have something a little different, something special. I was a guest on the Disruptors podcast, and I wanted to broadcast that for my audience here. And the reason why is because we go pretty deep into talking about the vivid selling framework as it relates to different industries and talking about the emotional trajectory that we want to take someone on a sales conversation. So enjoy this conversation with me being interviewed by Steve Trang. Look out for a few things in this, because if you've been listening to the Close More Sales podcast for a while, you've heard me talk about a lot of these things before. I want to make sure that you still get something out of this, even though it's not as deep a dive of me doing a talking head thing at the camera. It's me in conversation on a different podcast. So look out for ways we talk about sales, ways we talk about getting people emotional, the nuances of making sure we know how to have a conversation where someone feels compelled to take action, where we paint a vivid vision of their current situation, of their future state, and create almost like this tension between where they are currently and where they want to go. And think about how this relates to what you are currently doing. The best way to make use of listening to a podcast, of listening to one of our training calls, of anything we teach inside of the sales space is to be actively thinking about how you can apply the principles, the techniques, the tactics, the nuances of what we talk about to what you are currently doing. If you zone out and simply absorb it as entertainment, it stays entertainment. And that's fine, but I would rather you treat this as education. And it is education if you can learn something from it that you then apply to what you currently do. So I challenge you before listening to this conversation to think and be strategic about listening for what we talk about and how it relates to what you currently do. It's the best way to get use out of this time and out of listening to this show. So without further ado, here I am on the Disruptors podcast. Enjoy.
Hey everybody, thank you for joining us for today's episode of Disruptors. Today we have Ian Ross with the Close More Sales podcast to talk about how to get prospects to close themselves. Now guys, I'm on a mission to create 100 millionaires. The information on this show alone is enough to help you become a millionaire in the next 5 to 7 years. If you'll take consistent action, you will become one. And guys, if you get value out of today's show, please hit that subscribe button. That way we can all grow together. Now the reason why Ian is back again for a third time is that we look at the analytics and we've noticed that some of the most listened to episodes are when we talk about sales. So let's talk about sales.
Sure.
Now, you have a passion project or a passion term. You go by vivid selling on Instagram, right? And we haven't really talked a lot about vivid selling and what that means.
Yeah.
So let's talk about it. What is vivid selling?
Yeah, and this got brought up because when I started the Close More Sales podcast, you're like, you should have it be your name because people are searching for your name. They're going to want to identify you. And every variation imaginable of my name is taken on Instagram. Ian.Ross, the Ian Ross, the real Ian Ross, Ian_Ross, Ian. It's all taken. It's like John Smith in Scotland. So it's a very popular name. So I stuck to the name Vivid Selling. And what Vivid Selling is, it's a framework that I came up with, so it wasn't taken, that's entirely built around the right order of which questions to ask someone in a sales conversation to get them to feel like this was their idea. So VIVID is an acronym that stands for a few words that is a different section for me asking questions to move someone through the sale.
Yeah.
So,
So before you get into Vivid,
sure.
right? Because you're talking about for them to feel like they're taking action.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that we came up with in the last few months is like, what's our philosophy? You know, when we talk about our sales training, like why our sales philosophy, why our sales training versus all the other options, right? And one of those is we don't close people, right? We get them to sell themselves.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why is, Chris Voss talks about a lot in Never Split the Difference, in that people's desire for autonomy will sometimes be stronger than desire to help themselves.
So true.
Now, you're a maverick, right? We're talking about this for the show. I'm an individualist. One of the best ways to make sure we don't do something is to require and demand that we do it.
It's the most default way you can guarantee I will do something is you tell me I can't do it. And the way to get me to not do something is tell me I have to do it. That's very true. Yeah.
Right. Outside of marriage, right? When the wife says do the dishes, like you do the dishes. Like
she's actually gotten smart. She's like, you probably don't want to do the dishes right now. And I'm like, I'll do the dishes all day. What are you talking about? She's smart enough now that she's
figured that out.
She's using she's treating me like I'm a toddler to get me to do stuff all the time because I'm
smart woman.
Yeah, I say like I'm not a complicated man. I'm very simple. You tell me I can't do something or I shouldn't, that'll get me to take action.
Absolutely. So going back to the reason why you created the Vivid Selling Framework was so that it was their idea.
Yes.
And they're doing it for their reasons and justifications, right? So getting people to sell themselves. So I just want to kind of highlight that point. The traditional sales process, pushing people to take action, demanding, right? Like one of the reasons why I struggle so hard in sales for a majority of my career is because when it came time to push them for the close, ask for the order, it was always so uncomfortable and there's always this resistance. So you want to talk about that real quick before we get into the Vivid Framework?
Yeah, I mean, the first sales book that I ever read and really digested to try and absorb that I want to take action on was The Way of the Wolf by Jordan Belfort. And that has a great section, chapter, great covering on tonality and being intentional with tonality. That has inspired me immensely. My biggest differentiator from Jordan Belfort and by extension, most traditional sales training in Jordan Belfort's straight line system and how most people sell anything involves an aspect of pushing someone towards the sale.
Mm-hmm.
You push them down the straight line. You push them towards the product. You ask for the sale. They reveal a hesitation, and then you push and push and push until they crack and go and say, fine.
Mm-hmm.
And I have seen over and over again in multiple industries with different levels of prospects, different price points, different reasons to buy, that the best way to not only get someone to take action, but then not change their mind, not cancel the credit card or email a cancellation or back out of a contract or go never mind or ghost you or any of those things, is for them to feel like they wanted to do this in the first place. Mm-hmm. The best compliment I ever got when selling solar was after I just finished Never Split the Difference, after spending 2 hours in someone's home, just mirroring the guy the whole time. Mm-hmm. The wife came out and when she saw we were moving forward, felt the need. She had to tell me, hey, just so you know, we're moving forward because we wanted to, not because you're a good salesperson. And my thought process was the reason you think that is because I'm a great salesperson.
Right.
But of course I was like, no, I barely said anything. This was all your idea.
Yeah.
If I can and what was key about that one, I was right before I went on vacation. There was a hiccup with financing or inspection or something. So my manager had to get it across the line with the hiccup. And when I got back from vacation, my manager at that company asked me, he was worried that I had promised solar could do something it couldn't, because the guy was so resolved of no, I need to keep doing this, even though they kept on having a financing problem. There kept on being issues. He was like, what did you tell this guy? Because I've never seen someone so resolved to get something across the line. Usually you encounter one hiccup in the post-sale process, and they're like, I'm done.
Yeah.
And he kept going. What did you promise him? Did you tell him this is going to save his marriage or something? It's like, no, this was his idea. I had nothing to do with this. I just got out of the way in guiding you to make that decision.
Yeah. And I want to kind of touch on this, right, where she was saying, you're not a good salesperson, right?
Right.
And the way I always like to equate this into sports, I can't remember who the Saints were playing. Maybe it was the Niners or whoever, but there was a pretty blatant, transparent pass interference, right? And then, the joke was the refs were betting on the game. And so if you think about the typical horrific sporting event, it's because we can see the officiating,
Right.
right? If you notice the refs, it's a bad ref.
True.
But if you don't notice the refs, then it's a well officiated game, right? And I think this kind of lines up with your process of like they didn't see the sale happening.
Right. Yeah, we've talked about not showing the seams of the sale a little bit, like showing the magic trick. And if I can do this right, I'm simply having a conversation with you. And at the end of it, you either decide yourself based on what you tell me that what I recommended makes sense or it doesn't. It's entirely up to you. And I give you that sensation the entire way across through a variety of tactics and techniques while moving someone through the vivid selling framework to have the emotional trajectory make the most sense for them to feel like they decided to take action right now.
Yeah. Okay. So going back into this. So VIVID is an acronym.
Yes. It stands, so VIVID. The first V is for vision. The second one is identify, validate, impact decision. So how I think about that is in moving someone through different phases of the sale, in my mind, I am moving them through different phases of types of questions I am asking them to arrive at the right type of conclusion at the end. So it's the vision from to where they want to go, like what their goals are, what they're trying to accomplish. After I finish that stage, I identify the gap between where they are right now, their current circumstances, and where they want to be. The middle V is not a step as much of as a philosophy, which is validate their hesitations and concerns at all times, but not necessarily agree with it. So give them the sensation that they are heard, but not necessarily agree with the value of their hesitation. Then the money is made on the impact of not taking action. I often try and quantify the problem and quantify what this has cost to them to do nothing. Because to me, the real enemy is not a competitor, it's not the market, it's inaction. If I do this right, the scariest thing for me is you doing nothing. Inaction is the cost. What's the cost of not doing anything? How is that going to affect you? What are the other ripple effects of that? If you don't make any changes, what could this be like? What are you missing out on? That type of idea. And then finally, the decision. What would they like to decide to do? And the way I organize the closing question always has variables. There's no exact closing question that I can say, ask this closing question, then move forward every time, because it will always have variables based on what they have told me throughout the conversation.
Right. So starting with the first V, right? So vision. So then how do we build out this vision where they want to go?
It's so important. And also the reason I'm starting with vision, because other sales processes might say, find the problem first. And that's fine. There's an aspect of trying to justify that this is a lead worthy of running your sales process. So to me, the ideal emotional trajectory of a sales conversation is gain to pain to pen. Pen is deciding to sign and take action. If there's enough pain, we can skip the gain entirely because pain is what causes action. It causes urgency to change it now. So many sales processes involve finding the problem. And then when I solve it, won't that be great? Sign here right now. The problem with that trajectory emotionally is that when you end on the gain, people might think this sounds great, but it doesn't inspire urgency. The avoidance of pain, the negative emotion, the negative motivation is what inspires you to want to fix this right now, not this sounds great, I'm going to fix this next week. So even though you might still get plenty of sales ending on gain, you're running a substandard process because you're not creating urgency in the way you ask questions. So I'm starting with vision because it's not only does that give me the option to talk about what if you can't achieve that and create pain in taking away the gain you verbalize, but also it's easier for people to talk about positive things. If I start a sales conversation and go, what are you missing out on? You're going to be more on guard. You're not going to be willing to reveal to me all the nuances of what your real problems are because it's too early on in the conversation. We haven't built the right type of rapport, which is trust that I'm an expert worthy of telling your problems to. So I'd much rather start with easier questions that are easier to talk about, which is how great things could be. What do you want to change? So it depends on what you're selling. If you're selling sales training, the vision of how great things could be is a different outcome than if you're trying to buy someone's house at a discount, right? So to be clear. But if in the instance of selling something where there is a gain like a program, something that they're investing in themselves, I'm always asking questions like, I start broad. Almost all these start broad and get more specific. So it'd be like, what are some of your goals in the next 3 to 5 years? Okay. Tell me a little bit more about that. Okay. If you're doing that, how much money would you actually be making? Okay. If you're making that much money, is that different from what you're doing right now? Okay. So if you're making that excess amount, what would your life look like with that excess? I'm starting to paint a vivid picture, no pun intended, about the vision of the future. And the more specific we can get by also grounding you in reality, in the actual visuals, the more powerful that picture will be.
Yeah.
So I love talking about a moment in time, a sensation you could be at. So like, okay, if we get you this, you're going to make an extra 20,000 a month. You're saying if your business worked out the way you want it. Okay, what would your life be like if you were making an extra almost $250,000 a year? What would you take more trips? What's a trip if you had that type of money? What's the first trip you envision taking your wife on? Like, what would that moment be? Okay, you're sitting on a yacht, floating off of Monaco. You've saved up to be able to give her this experience. Like, how are you feeling when the sun's beating on your face? I'm tethering that sensation to a moment in time. The more you can visualize that in real time as a sensation, the more powerful it will be when I take it away, asking you to make a decision.
And that's when we get to identify?
Yeah. Now identifying is starting to ask questions about like, I'm hearing all these things. Like, what's been stopping you from starting to get those results? What are the challenges been? What have you already tried? Or maybe what's stopping you from really making a real attempt? I'm starting to chip away at the vision by pulling you back to what you've already done and what you're trying to do. What is missing that's getting you to that vision? What's also clear is that you got to be careful because the vivid is the framework, but the nuances of how you ask those questions and move between those questions is its own kind of thing. Because sometimes I might ask, what do you envision the challenge to be that's stopping you from getting there? And they might reveal some type of problem. I can give you a perfect example. It just happened not too long ago where I sell sales training. I was asking someone after they described this really great vision for their business, what's stopping you from getting there? And it was to him all marketing. His sales was amazing. The sales didn't need any help. It was all marketing.
Of course.
Right? Which is the normal aspect. So I expect that type of thing.
Everybody that's struggling in sales thinks it's a marketing
Right, of
problem.
course. It couldn't possibly be me. I'm the GOAT.
Yeah.
I'm the best salesperson of all time. But what's the problem there is if I'm asking more questions about what you just said, you're talking about the wrong issue. So I now need to go underneath that issue or insert some doubt as to that being the reason or insert a new belief so I can get you on a talk track where it makes more sense to ask more questions. Right. If I'm asking you more about the marketing problem and I cannot solve your marketing problem, that doesn't work. So the nuances of making sure they answer the right way is another level underneath that we wouldn't have time to go into today. Yeah. But I want to make sure, assuming that you are playing ball with my questions enough where your answers make sense for what I want to move towards the next question. I just want to figure out everything you've tried, what's holding you back, what's not working. Right? That's where I'm starting to do. Like, what do you need to improve to get to that vision, or at least take the first steps towards going towards the vision of what you want to accomplish.
Right. And then we get to
validate. Now that's really just my approach to handling with either objections or obstacles, because it's validate, but not necessarily agree with their hesitations and concerns at all times. I differentiate here because I've heard Grant Cardone say, always agree with your prospect. And I even heard someone who I really respect, who is actually my dream person to get on the Close More Sales podcast when he's ready, is Alex Hormozi. I even heard him get this wrong on a training, which was he gave the example. Well, Grant Cardone always, was a car sales guy to begin with. And I always say, if I'm selling Mercedes-Benz and we're on the lot and someone's standing there and goes, I hate Mercedes. I can't go, I agree with you. Mercedes are terrible. Buy this anyway. Right? The agree doesn't work. But the giving an objection is just the raising of a shield. And I don't want to hit the shield head on, because if I don't knock it out of your hand, then you're going to dig in harder. I'd rather just give you the sensation of walking around it. And agreeing and validating are both the sensation of walking around, but I want to avoid the potential mix-up of maybe agreeing with you if it's not the case. And Hormozy got this wrong because he gave an example of talking about a software product, and someone goes, I hate this feature from your product. And he goes, I agree with you, it's no good, but tell me more about that. Like, that's crazy. Why would you agree with the thing? But I want to give you, he's right about the sensation. I don't want to fight them on that point. So I would say something, in the Mercedes example, I would say, I've heard that before. Typically, the reason I've noticed in the past someone doesn't like Mercedes could be because either they didn't like people they knew who drove it, or they had a bad experience with one particular model from the past. I'm curious, why is that coming up for you now? I seek more clarity about the reasoning, but I still give the sensation of I'm not fighting you on your objection without agreeing it. So it's...
And the point here is that you're not trying to overcome or make them like defend their position. It's while they're saying they agree, we're saying, I can see why you feel that way.
Yes.
Let's explore why you feel this way.
Exactly. So we can actually realize maybe that doesn't relate to this model here if it's a Mercedes. If it's you don't like this feature, you say, I hate this feature of this tech thing. What do you hate about this feature? Oh, I hate that it forces me to do this. Oh, if there's a way we could make it didn't force you to do that, would you care about the feature? Oh, no, I just thought it was that problem. It's just understanding the root cause of why they say that. Now, they might say something that you do agree with. That's why I say validate, but not necessarily agree with, not never agree with. You can if you agree, but I'm trying to give a framework that can be applied in all circumstances so I can follow a best practice to move someone across the line of a sales conversation. So I need to make sure I validate, but not necessarily agree with. So I've heard things like that before. I get where you're coming from with that. Like or even the first time I've heard that, but that makes sense to me. Or just my most neutral thing, like, okay, that makes sense. Okay, sure. I'm validating your pushback and hesitation and concerns, but I be careful to not necessarily agree so I don't shoot myself in the foot.
Right.
So that's the middle V. That just permeates throughout the whole process. I'm always validating your hesitations and concerns, whether it's an objection going at the end of the sale, which is now I need to think it over, or an obstacle that left unattended to will become an objection at the end, which is a thing that not enough people talk about either. Because so many salespeople are so focused on, let me present what I do and read my script on how to present what I do, that they're not using active listening skills to notice the person just told them a thing that if I don't deal with this now, if I don't call out the elephant in the room, this will be an objection at the end.
100%.
And at the end, emotions are higher, and it's way harder to overcome it if I wait till the end. One of the things that we immediately aligned with when we started talking about sales the first time was the ideal scenario means there are no objections at the end. Because if I did this right, the natural conclusion by the time we've reached the end of the conversation is simply to move forward. If you're running a process where you are asking, and here's the price, do you want to do this option or this option? And they give you an objection that like is out of left field and you have no idea why, you're not running an ideal process. You can make plenty of money doing that process. I want to be clear because I always have to say this because if you speak in extremes online, I probably should speak in more extremes because it makes the clip go more viral. It does. I don't do a good job. Oh, you know what? I'll reframe it for the extremes. You're a moron if you're dealing with objections at the end of every sale. You're an idiot and you follow a dumb process and you have a dumb trainer. I'll say that there, okay? So, because it's not the ideal process. There's no reason to have to make things harder for yourself. You don't have to make things harder on yourself. You could simply, if someone says, I need to talk to my spouse before I make any decisions earlier on in the call, and you go, boy, I hope I convey enough value with my memorized presentation that when I do a quick option close at the end, they'll just move forward and forget that they told me they have to talk to their spouse.
Right.
You're a moron. And whoever told you to follow that process is equally as dumb, if not dumber, because they've seen this not happen over and over again. And the fact that they haven't noticed that this is a problem means you should stop listening to them. And they're not the greatest of all time. Right. So that's the validate. That's the validate section there. Yeah.
I'm filming this video for the man himself, Mr. Ian Ross. The guy crushes. The guy's the best person in sales I've ever seen. I've invested elsewhere and I haven't got the same results. I've gone from being a seller, making 5K a month, to being a hybrid role, making 11K a month, to now be 4 months down the line from 5K to on a closing opportunity, inbound, full calendar, with the best opportunity, the best offer in my space. OTE is around 20K a month from month 2. So I've gone from 5K to 20K. If that's not a return on your investment, I don't know what is, man. If you're a salesperson and you don't invest in sales training, you're gonna get left behind because your job is to be better at sales. and sales training directly makes you more money.
My name is Lance McCann. I've recently switched sessions with Ian Ross. Those conversations with Ian has made me $50,000 in the past 2 deals that I've had. I was able to go back and renegotiate the original purchase price on one deal, and I saved $40,000, and I got another $10,000 off my other deals. Call Ian, give him a chance. You won't regret it.
If you like what you just heard and you'd like to have similar types of results, similar success, text CLOSE, C-L-O-S-E, to 33777, and we'll see if you qualify to join Advanced Sales Mastery. We are taking people from good to great.
All right. And then impact.
Yeah. Impact is starting to get into quantifying the problem because to me, and I really want to make this point, and because I've heard you say a version of this too, and I really want to make sure I'm clear what I mean by this. When I say what is sales, I usually describe it, I've come to the point of describing it as the creation of certainty. So I've also heard it said many times over, and I don't disagree with it in theory, that sales is change, right? Like, you know that sales is change. In the context of the professional, I don't think that is clear enough for what the goal should be. Because the real way, it doesn't say, is it a change for the better? Is it a change for the worse? Is it a change that involves transactions? Like, what is sales really? Sure, it's change, but as the professionals whose job it is to have a conversation where at the end they feel certain to want to buy, the most important thing is that your prospect feels like whatever they have to spend, whatever they have to give up to get the end result is minor in comparison to the benefits that they would be trading that for. It has to be lesser than, not an equal exchange. That's because there's always a risk of that this won't work, and I'm exposing myself, I'll look stupid if it doesn't work. So it always needs to feel less of a risk than not taking action on the thing.
Yeah. Well, I think the key here is they have this sensation like, I have to do this.
Right.
Like, please, whether it's please buy my house now or give me the freaking product. I want to walk out of here with this on my wrist or whatever, but they're closing themselves.
Yes.
They're closing you. Like, I need this. Get out of my way so I can have it.
Exactly. So my goal in saying that sales is the creation of certainty is making sure that at all times I am aligned with making sure in the prospect's brain, they are certain that this change is something they need to do right now, because not taking action on it is far more costly than the risk of looking stupid for getting a thing that doesn't work, or the risk of all the negative consequences that could happen if they don't buy into whatever it is I'm trying to sell.
And I might add, just not on top of being certain, conviction. Like, they need conviction, like, I have to do this.
Sure. Yeah. It's true, because theoretically, someone could be certain but not feel the pain of that certainty. It might be like, because that, to me, that's ending on gain. Oh, I'm certain I want this, but I don't have an urgency to do this now. The conviction with that certainty, to me, is the definition of urgency.
Right.
Like, now I need to do this, not I need to do this next week.
Yeah, and that's how we get that urgency.
That's how we get the urgency. So, to me, I always want to try and quantify the problem in some way, shape, or form. And by quantify the problem, I mean quantify in action, as in how much is doing nothing costing you. Based on the numbers you revealed to me in your vision, and then we've talked about how great things could be. Like, okay, it sounds like you're missing on at $20,000 a month on the short term, and you said you could reinvest some of that into your business, and over 5 years you'd be making $1 million a year at that return. So how different is what you're making right now from $1 million a year? It's $800,000. So it sounds like doing nothing is costing you $800,000 every single year. Wow, like, that's, if you don't make any changes, and like you said, you're going to reinvest some of that, how much are you missing out on in terms of a decade? Like, the lifestyle you could have with that, the lifestyle you could give to others, to the people you care about, what are you depriving them by deciding to do nothing? I need to create a pain associated with an action. There needs to, and the more I quantify that, the easier it can be. I love asking questions, giving away the secret, but like, I'll ask questions like, hey, game theory wise, if you could be making $800,000 a year inside of 5 years, what would it even be worth to you, assuming this could get you those results?
Right.
If anyone is answering that even remotely intellectually honestly, it'll be less than my charge. So even if they'll well, theoretically, if $800,000 a year takes 3 years, that's I would pay $100,000 for that. Okay, so you probably don't even have $100,000 to pay into that. No, realistically, what do you even have access to? We're just talking hypothetically around numbers, but we're talking about we're tethering the benefits not even to how great this program will be in a week, but what your life could look like in a decade. And the emotional imbalance of not taking action and everything staying the same, or deciding, this feels a little scary. That's more money that I wanted to spend, but I know I can take action on this. This, you know what? I'm someone who, when I spend money, I take action on the thing. I'm that type of person. I'm going to do this. If I can do that right, then the way I talk about the impact of not taking action should give you a sensation of it's crazy for me not to take this risk for whatever the cost is because of the vision I just verbalized to this person asking me questions.
Right. Gotcha. And it's funny, I just had a call earlier today and I was asking her like how much it's costed her, like not having their sales floor trained. And she's like, I mean, I think we've lost like 8 contracts so far. I was like, oh, how much is that? It's like, oh, like 35,000. It's like, oh, okay, so maybe $250,000. And as we're going through, it's like, and that's just the ones you can remember.
Yeah.
Right? And then later on, she's like, saw what you did there. Good. So you're aware. Like we do what we preach. And then getting to decision.
Yeah. So depending on what you sell, who's ever's listening to this podcast, and depending on how they're positioning things, there could be different ways you close it. Like my favorite closing questions always have variables in it, recapping what we talked about. And I've heard you say this on our a 2-day event, which is that when you are running your appointment, you're asking your questions to the person, and they're revealing to you all their pain. That is you gathering all the tools on the table that you are going to use to close the sale.
Right.
So how good my questions are, how deep I got you to go, what I got you to say to me is going to play into my variables for the closing question. So in the instance of selling sales training, in this instance, I might be like, okay, if we can, get you started on the program so you can finally get to the process of making that extra $20,000 a month so that you can not only take your wife on that trip, but also start reinvesting back into the business so that 5-10 years from now, not only will you be making not only $1 million a year, but you're not going to be missing out on seeing your peers pass you by as you've been afraid to take action on stuff so far. We can do all that, and it's not going to cost you $100,000. It's going to cost you X amount. How should we prioritize this? It's so much more powerful because it's the words that they revealed to me.
Exactly.
I'm hitting the microphone. I'm so excited. It's so much more powerful because I'm using their words back to me and using their trajectory, what they want to do, to ask them how should we prioritize this? And I'll often say, hey, if we can do those things, do you even feel like that would be helpful? And they're like, well, yeah, I don't know if I have the money. Okay. Is it that you don't even have access to being able to pay for this thing? Or is it because you're not entirely sure, I could pay for it. I don't even know if I'll show up to the calls and take action on it. I'm letting you go no, I would show up I would take action. If I'm going to spend that money, I would take action on it. Yeah. Okay. So if you paid that amount of money, you would actually show up to the calls and go I'm going to apply this. Oh no, I'm the type of guy to do that. Okay. It sounds like that even by the very nature of choosing to invest in this would start you on the trajectory of getting those results, or am I missing something? No, I guess it would. You guess? No, it would. I'm always doubling down if I hear any certainty because I'm creating certainty in your mind, and I need you to verbalize that certainty if I want you to take action. I don't want to be the hero in the story of your life where you changed your business, you changed whatever you're doing. I'm simply the guide who pointed you in the right direction and let you go have your own journey.
Yeah. And so this is all part of Vivid Selling. And guys, if you guys are getting value here, Ian has his own podcast. It's the Close More Sales podcast. So you guys can definitely check that out there. There's a couple different things here where I think you and I are slightly different. So you're talking about if someone's buying something, right? But where we're typically having the conversations, more often than not, the people I work with are buying houses.
Sure.
And when we're buying houses, we generally go to pain and then gain and then loss of that gain as additional pain.
Sure.
right? So, but like if you're buying a product, the things I've said is, you're buying a car, buying a watch, buying travel, or MLM, right? We're typically selling something that you can kind of see,
Sure.
right? And when you're selling something you kind of see, like now you can picture yourself experiencing it, right? So we go there and like, okay, but here's where you are today. Versus like for us, we're buying houses. Let's just drill down to like how awful things are today,
Sure.
right? And then like, here's what it could be. So our sequence is a little bit different. How much of it, or is it because solely that we're buying someone's house and we're going through, we're dealing with someone that is going through pain and has is motivated to take action to deal with a problem versus buying a product?
The biggest reason it's a different, we go into pain first in the talking about buying an asset or buying someone's house in particular, is because to justify being worthy of the time of running a whole process and taking an hour and a half plus sometimes, I need to know you're actually worthy of being a prospect for a relatively unique circumstance. What's the percentage of homes that actually don't sell on the MLS every year? Do you remember?
That don't sell on MLS?
Yeah. Isn't it like 4%, 6%?
Oh, off the MLS. I got it. Yeah. So 4% historically homes sell outside the MLS.
Right. So there's a really important aspect that is more or less vetted in most high ticket encounters. That is not the case when talking to someone's home, which is that this is actually someone worthy of running the whole process for you. And if I'm talking to someone who just happens to be a homeowner, there's so many misconceptions and different steps that I need to qualify them first to justify talking about the gain and then taking away the gain. So there's a qualification step that involves the pain first in the emotional trajectory of gain to pain to pen that is more apparent in buying a house, because it just, chances are what I'm selling you by the time you've come to me in sales training space, you're probably a candidate for. So it's not, there's way more sifting and sorting in talking through people who need to buy out, like sell their home at a discount.
Yeah.
And so I want to make sure that I'm clear. Like I would only go gain to pain to pen if I already knew the person was in enough pain to justify going to the gain stage. Because what you just described and taking away the gain is the same emotional trajectory. It's just pain first kind of thing.
Well, because for me, I think for someone, talking about high ticket, right? High ticket, it's an abstract product. You don't know exactly what you're getting. You can't hold it in your hand. It's an intangible product, right? And so for that, we need them to see it in their mind's eye, right? Where they can basically touch it almost, right? And like, but we can't make it work. Versus, we're talking about buying someone's house. We do that also, but in addition to that, we go really deep in the pain because we need to get them super stressed and emotional.
Yeah.
Because that's what's going to compel someone. Like getting someone to spend 10, 15, 25, hear these things, $80,000 on a high ticket product is someone that is like desiring something.
Right.
Someone that's willing to sell their house at a steep discount is like, I just need to get away from this. And I'm moving away from pain, right? So one is moving towards is going towards something. The other one is moving away from something. But something that's really important here is, it's funny you call it vivid selling, because something that I've been looking at more recently is we need to get so clear on how awful something is today that we can basically, if we can't write it out, because we've said in their training, it's like, hey, they tell you what it is, you repeat it back to them, and that demonstrates that you get them, right? But like the highest standard, which, none of us are necessarily artists here, is if you can draw it out for them and now they can see it. It's like, yeah, this is what's going on. Here is what's going on. So the more vivid they can see it in their mind's eye, how awful everything is. And then have them describe back to you how awesome it's going to be after you buy their house, after they get their life back, they get back on their feet and so on. And again, how crystal clear in their mind's eye how it's going to be. And then, but what if we can't make that work?
Right.
And that's that pulling out the potential gain, right? So we go from pain to gain to loss of gain, which is just another pain. And this happened recently. I was talking to someone who has a dating offer, right? And it's like, well, how do we do this in dating? Okay. And so I was saying, well, if you're trying to sell a dating offer to a guy, let's think about the things that have sucked. So let's talk about the last girl that the conversation or the relationship did not proceed the way it wanted to go.
Sure.
I was like, hey, tell me more about, the last girl didn't go. What happened? What were the things that occurred that, what didn't go the way as planned? There's probably not a lot of things that went to plan, right? But how did you get friend zoned, basically? Right? Long and short of it is. And then it's like, oh man, that really sucks. Because again, we're selling an abstract product, right?
Yeah,
you can't hold it in your hand.
No, you can't.
And okay, tell me about the girl before that. And then we're going through the pain funnel 3 times. How about the third girl that didn't go the way you want it to go? And then let's pretend we've got it all figured out. You know how to talk to girls now. Tell me what that life's going to be like. And have them describe that again in their mind's eye. Because like the 3 girls are experiences that they've had. And they can refeel all those emotions again. But then tell me about, when you got this figured out, what's it going to be like? Describe it to me again, where you can like draw it vividly, right? And then what's that going to be like? Oh, but there's just one thing I'm worried about. What if we can't work together?
My biggest concern with starting the conversation with tell me about the girl who rejected you is that the person might have enough shame that they might not open up immediately about how terrible it was. If you do it 3 times, they might reveal it by the 3rd. But I'd be concerned that the one who comes to mind was actually probably the more painful one. And they've glossed over that one because it was too early on in the conversation. So I would want to get them trusting me I'm not a believer in the yes stack. It's not, I don't need 7 yeses in a row or anything stupid like that. But I do want to make sure we are in the mode of you feeling comfortable answering my questions. And so I want to start that process of me being curious and seeking clarity on what you said before I ask a question that is deeply impactful that I could use to get you across the line.
Yeah.
So my only concern in that instance, if I go, tell me about the first one, they might be like, I just didn't really go to plan. I'm like, shoot, that's not enough. I can say, tell me more about that, but I would rather make the process as easy as possible. So for me, I'd rather talk about like, what were you hoping to get out of this call?
Right.
Just, I like to start with what's easier on the brain to answer because my pain questions are really painful. And so if I start that way, I run the risk of like butting heads with the prospect because I haven't built enough trust or got them in the mode of answering my questions enough so that it feels like they're comfortable revealing the underlying implications of how bad that was and the shame because someone saw them get rejected or I don't have any experience with the dating offer, but I'm thinking about if I were to like coach that process, my biggest concern would be the very nature of a guy willing to have that conversation. He might be more closed off if I started the conversation with that question.
Yeah. All theoretical.
It's
right?
theoretical, right? It depends on the person. It depends on another thing we're not even talking about, how good the marketing is and how it framed them by the time the conversation was.
And that's the thing, like the guy that I was coaching up on this is doing well.
I'm sure his marketing's crushing it by the time they're getting to the call.
But he's also a really good marketer. And so like they already bought the product, they already bought the upsell, and then they booked the call.
Got it.
Right. So like because there's a little bit of negative self-admittance, right? There's a little bit of like, hey, I'm not a player.
Right.
So there's already a little bit of like, you had to be in such a spot where you admitted to yourself, because you have to admit to yourself you're not good with the ladies.
Sure.
For you to click on a Facebook ad, for you to go read the copy or watch the VSL.
Yeah.
And then go buy the product.
And then get the upsell.
Take the credit card out. Right. And then click on the Calendly link to book a call with somebody. Right. So, but I mean, your point is valid though, right? Like maybe they feel too much shame in having that conversation. Like, because I know, like, because I walked with him through the script, right? And the first thing is like, hey, thanks for jumping on a call. What were you hoping to get out of this? And then we went to set expectations. And then we went to let's talk about the last girl.
That makes sense to me, especially because you just revealed that these people have already paid something by the time they're getting to it.
Yeah.
Because where someone is in the whole process of being willing to pay for a thing determines their resistance to answering questions about pain. So, like, when I say it's a framework, it's because things can be sped up, things can be slowed down. It's just the general trajectory I think about taking someone on. And if we're already at a place where I know they're qualified enough that I can go into those questions sooner by the very nature of when they raise their hand to have the conversation. That speeds up the process. And this is some of the stuff we're doing for some clients is that, like, some aspects like buying a house, like most people run a relatively similar process. There might be different marketing messaging. You might be doing it virtual or in person. Like, everyone thinks theirs wholly unique compared to everyone else. But the nuances between companies acquiring houses is pretty minimal, right? In terms of other companies, it's selling a high ticket offer, an education product, selling a physical good. There's all these different nuances that would require some customization. It's hard to give a blanketed advice because I'm giving that answer before I realize that they've already swiped a credit card twice kind of thing before they're having the call. So that speeds that up a little bit.
Yeah, and what I'm really excited about, right? Because, we recently rebranded the Disruptors. We're teaching people how to sell other products, right?
Yeah.
We just had a vendor sign up for, Real Estate Sales Master, or not Real Estate Sales Master, but Sales Mastery, where we're doing weekly coaching. But I brought up, like, we're working with a guy who has a dating offer, right? One other one that, we've done a hypothetical. We haven't actually done this, but like we were like a physical trainer. I was like, hey, tell me more about this. How's it going? What have you tried? Did it work? Right? And then it's like, describe to me what's gonna be like once you're in the shape that you want to be, and you're going to parties, looking at you, what's that going to be like? Describe that to me. And this goes back to, we're talking about being able to draw the pain, being able to draw the gain. But one of the things that, for me, that's really important about having this vividly, again, no pun intended, right? So you did a really good job with that acronym, is that we want to have not just how crystal clear things suck at the moment and how crystal clear it's going to be when it's awesome, but if they can see that distance, that goes back to the impact you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
We want you to feel this distance because that is it's like a rubber band. You can't stand that is stretched.
Right.
And you want to close that gap as fast as possible.
Right. Yeah.
So, what is your perspective on that?
Obstacle I hear from newer wholesalers is finding buyers for their deals. Because unless you've built a massive buyers list or have a huge dispo team, you might struggle to move your deals. So when we started working with InvestorLive, we've been able to reach new buyers and sell deals faster at higher prices. We can see buyers in our area, their contact information, and with the new AI capabilities, connect with the buyers most interested in our deals based on the algorithms. We can also see who's clicked on our deals, how many pictures they clicked on, and how long they spent looking at it, and finally, what actions they took after engaging with our deals. We are now connected with thousands of buyers in our markets, and we now know exactly where we are with each deal and what next steps to take. If this sounds like something that would resolve or help your dispo process, I highly encourage you, go to the website, put in Disruptors for 10% off, so you can focus on locking up deals and less time worried, stressed, and frustrated about finding buyers.
I completely agree. Yeah. And also, there's some other ways, especially when you're having conversation, that you really can get someone to even feel more emotion and initiative, to feel more personalized to them. So in the instance of, and this is the stuff I go into my program, which is, it's not meant for people just getting into sales, because the stuff we go into is far too advanced. It will go way over your head if you're like, when do I ask for the sale? If that's your thing, we have stuff for you. We can send you courses and stuff, but to be worthy of the time of what I want to dive into, it's really nuanced. So by even the nature of the way you describe your pain to me, the words you choose to use to describe it, I will orient questions around gain as the inverse with the same type of pain, using the same type of words. People are familiar with this in neurolinguistics programming as someone describes something kinesthetically. I also want to use kinesthetic if it's audio, visual. An example could be, this happened not too long ago. Someone was describing the pain for his wife getting the divorce. He's like, I feel like I got the rug ripped out from under me with this divorce. And now I'm dealing with all these challenges. If he's describing his pain as the rug ripped out from under me, I'm like, hey, do you feel like if we got this taken care of for you so you could be in the next situation with your kids, you're going to finally feel like your feet are like, now your feet are planted on the ground going forward if we could get this done. I'm using an inverse of the same type of language you use that will connect with how you visualize pain in the way I'm asking the question to get you to start visualizing the success. And it doesn't come through it doesn't come through telling, it comes through asking. So I'll use the language so that you're like, yeah, it would. And then you talked about painting that vivid picture. The way I do that, I mean, I am willfully ignorant once you start down this path so that you keep talking. So if I go, do you feel like now your feet would be planted on the ground if you could move forward? You go, yeah, I would. I would go, how so? Mm-hmm. Start speaking. Start telling me in your words how things would be. Even though I just described it, I want you to do it. And if I'm doing this right with tone, because tone is incredibly important and not covered enough in sales, how to actually do this in a way that doesn't make people go, whoa, or like I have certain things I've done, like softening questions. When I know a question is going to be particularly harder for them to answer, like what's the greatest challenge with this? I will soften it by making it easy to answer. Like, hey, I'm curious, and because you know your situation better than me. If there's one thing about what you just said that's like the hardest thing to deal with, what do you think that would even be? I've softened it. If I just go, what's the hardest thing about that? You're like, I don't know, right? There's all these different. That's the nuances of the in-between. Mm-hmm. The framework is the general trajectory we take someone through. So if I do these nuances right, you've described some of the stuff I do as like putting the thumb on the scale. Mm-hmm. When I would argue the thumb is nothing. I have a magnet under the scale. By the time it's done, you have no idea why you felt so compelled, like I need to do this right now. And this is what we're trying to teach people to do, because it sounds very like Jedi mind tricky, like, wow, like it's so cool that you can do this, but I'm not interested in trying to impress people with my sales skills. My goal is to train other people to do the exact same thing. Mm-hmm. This is like, I try and emphasize this point on my sales training. I'm like, this is not the wow, Ian's so good at role playing with us show. That does nothing for me but stoke my ego, which is not the goal of this. I want to make sure you get actionable results and can do a version of the same thing, selling the way you sell based on your personality. So you're not hearing objections, you're just moving someone through the process naturally to get them to want to take action. And that tension between how great their life could be and the pain for their exact same circumstances, if you ask the questions right and use language that taps into that person's brain, that makes it feel even more customized to them because of how they verbalize their pain, they won't even realize why. They're like, yeah, that tension it's going to snap. I need to do this now. Mm-hmm. When they have that level of interest, you could even pull back. Like, I mean, if you did this now, do you even feel like you would hop on the calls and take advantage of this? I'm pull back even more because I need you to be like, yes, yes, yes. I'm like, yeah, but not today. Like, I want to pull back as much as possible so you are selling yourself.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to we get prospects to sell themselves.
Yes.
And one thing you touched on a moment ago is the elements of personality, mm-hmm. right? So like, there's all sorts of different. There are a lot of people teaching sales, right? We mentioned Grant Cardone with agree, right? And then there are other people that have a car sales background, and I think that there are a lot of options out there, and I think that training is fine if they don't have a right with precision. You know, using that philosophy in a scenario, particularly in real estate, where they don't have to be closed today, right? Like you drive out the lot, it's done.
Right.
20 minutes by. The moment they leave the finance department and they get their keys, the moment it leaves the parking lot, it's done.
Yeah.
It's a non-refundable product, right? In real estate, they need to be sold now. They need to be sold tonight. They need to be sold when they tell their kids. They need to be sold tomorrow when the title company calls. They need to be sold in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, however long it takes for this to go. The philosophy of pushing for a sale, pretty risky in that environment.
Not only do they need to be sold in 30 days, they need to be sold multiple times along that when the neighbor's like, oh, I could buy it. I'll buy that for you. Don't sell it to a stranger. They need to be able to advocate for the process that they agreed to when even things flare up, let alone the 20 minutes of just driving off the lot.
Right. Yeah.
Thinking that you can logic trap with memorized lines into someone to taking action when they can just cancel it, like with selling an education product or training or signing a contract to sell your house or getting a solar inspection or the underwriter for life insurance or anything that isn't car sales is absolute gibberish. You can make plenty of money forcing people to do something that they don't want to do and hoping that they don't realize they don't want to cross it. You can make money, but you're leaving way more money on the table by running the wrong process.
Well, particularly like, you have an insurance background too, right?
Sure.
So you've done solar, you've done insurance. I remember you were telling me of an example of there's one guy who every month is a victim to chargebacks.
Oh, it wasn't one guy. There were so many guys. Insurance, because I was selling life insurance, which is another intangible product, right? If you're thinking like, I'm a pretty good sales guy, try selling life insurance to union truck drivers in New York City with pure commission and tell me like, you're not just relying, because so many car sales guys, like people were going to buy, you actually got in the way. You were more annoying for them buying the car. Car sales guys suck for the most part. They get no training. The training they get is someone shouting at them and they think the machismo is the way to do it. Like, it's garbage. Like they're terrible. I've never had a good experience with a car sales guy. I go in there like to get content and negotiate with them because I think it's funny. They're not good, right? They're just not good. And they set other industries back because of the very nature of the second you drive off the lot, you're like, oh shoot, what am I supposed to do? So they do deceptive tactics. They make money in screwing people over. Like that's actually how they do it, which is the opposite of how we do stuff in education, at least how we do stuff in education. Can't speak for everyone. And so to me, there's nothing sillier than thinking if I push someone to do something, this is great. And this happened all the time in life insurance, another intangible product where there's going to be an underwriting department and you're like, this is for life. This is not just 30 days. Like I was selling whole life insurance. So you need to be sold on this for the bill in 50 years. The second you cancel, it's over. So I needed to make sure there was enough commitment that as this bill came up, as things got tight, you weren't forced forward. And in life insurance, there's this guy who was like, oh my gosh, he was the perfect example of someone who's thought sales was all forcing someone to do something by logic trapping them with objections. Like he's like, I can overcome anything. I can sell ice to an Eskimo, which I believe Zig Ziglar made the point out. Like if you can sell ice to an Eskimo, you're not a salesperson, you're a con man because Eskimos don't need ice, right? It's the same idea here.
Right.
If you can be like, oh, I thought you were a man, you don't want to protect your family. It's like, and then shockingly, these garbage people wanted to cancel a thing that they felt forced to buy on a Zoom call when it was in his home. And I see this in multiple industries. You see it all over social media. Pushing someone to feeling like they gave you a reluctant yes is a recipe for disaster. Because not only will you get the charge back, but you had to force them, and then you got the charge back, and then you burn out. And salespeople deserve better. Like sales professionals, by and large, suck at sales because most of their sales training sucks. They've been trained by garbage, outdated stuff when consumers couldn't go online. And they still, because people have a bias in their mind, they still think that's the way to train. And it's ridiculous. It's silly. You sound silly. But the biggest problem for me is not even that it's that salespeople suck. It's that I believe there's a better way to do it. And I love salespeople. Like Close More Sales podcast is to inspire the sales professional. For someone who has conversations where how well you speak determines how much money you make. You are the athletes of the business world. Your performance matters. You matter to companies. You move the economy. You are what drives revenue. You should be celebrated, not hated. The reason you're hated and considered like the sleazy car salesman is because of your stupid tactics and forcing people to do something they don't want to do. And I am not considered that way because I help you make your decision. So I don't identify with that. And if you don't want to either, reach out to us because I believe this so firmly that sales is a noble profession. It's helping people. It's guiding them to help. And so many professionals do it wrong.
Right. And then going back to another thing too, because we're talking about the vivid selling framework, right? Is that there are a lot of other people that like preach like scripts, right? Like magic words to say. And they work if you're dealing with another person who is saying one of the 10 exact objections
right
you have in the training. But funny enough, you're dealing with a person. And every person is having a slightly different experience. So like the idea that you have all the possible objections. Today's podcast is brought to you by motivatedleads.com. With them, you can get $300 worth of quality local leads sent exclusively to your inbox by just mentioning my name. I've used them, and they're one of the best producers of solid seller leads on a local level. And they fully guarantee the leads that they send you. To get your $300 free credit, just head over to motivatedleads.com, hit the claim your area button, and let them know that I sent you. You have all the possible objections.
It's ridiculous. It's
Yeah.
absurd, right? Scripts are training wheels, okay? That's fine to learn the process. But if you saw professional cyclists in the Tour de France using training wheels, you would laugh. That's what I think of by salespeople who have to rely on scripts, who've been in this a long time.
Yeah.
It is simply training wheels. If you think, all right, time to learn a new thing, let me just memorize the script and say it the same way every time, you're in the Tour de France with training wheels on. You're always handicapped by within these two lines. But as soon as there's any hard right or left turn, you can only turn as far as the training wheels.
Yeah.
And also, like, there's an aspect of certain lines that are like marketing. And what I mean by that is that marketing tends to work really well in a certain way until it doesn't. A certain line, a certain tactic, a certain like online technique, right? Like right now, a big thing in real estate investing is sending a check in the mail for the offer. That will work until it doesn't, and then that doesn't work anymore, right? And the problem with the memorized lines is you're, first off, cutting yourself at the kneecaps by using these training wheels to only deal with certain scenarios. But by the very nature of repeating the same thing every single time, regardless of the nuances of what the prospect told you, it's a matter of time until that is said enough that it doesn't hit home for the right people, because it sounds like a check in the mail or an email from a Nigerian prince. We've all heard this enough times. It's like, I know what this is. I can now see the seams of the sale. And what happens is, even if you are a good salesperson who has their best interest at heart, who's just relying on a script because that's how you were trained, you are now lumped together with every other person who ever reached out to them sounding the exact same way. You lose the ability to differentiate yourself from scammers and nobodies because you used a regurgitated script.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things in, like, you know, my poor friend Brent Daniels, I love the guy, right? Love the guy. But everyone knows the TTP script.
The TTP script is a victim of its own success.
Yeah.
Because that script was so popular, now your joke is that more homeowners know that than wholesalers, which is probably true.
Right.
Which means it loses its effectiveness. It's not that those words were bad.
They were really good the first time any homeowner heard it.
That's exactly my point. So, but if they didn't take action on it and someone else read that script, even if the person calling the second time could offer more money, had the better interest at heart, was going to treat them right, you are lumped in with the person who sounded the first way. So if you are relying on a script you got given from your company, you downloaded online, or worse, paid a guru for, chances are it's a matter of time until you're just being lumped in with other salespeople saying the exact same thing.
Yeah.
We teach frameworks so you can sell based on how you talk. You can sell on your personality. You can sell how you are in a way that gets them to want to take action themselves.
Exactly, right? And like Ian and I, obviously we have a lot of alignment and beliefs and so on, but we're going to say things slightly differently.
Always,
right? Because Ian is a lot more expressive.
Yeah, as it's been clear a little bit on this podcast.
He's a lot more expressive. And, you know, I have shocked people, right, with the things I've said. Like, you know, the joke is like, you know, it sounds to me like money's more important than your grandkids, right? I don't say it that way, but I've said that.
Pretty close.
I've said it multiple times.
Yeah.
And I kind of, I have this, I won't say it's a reputation, but like, it's kind of funny that you'll say this to another person, and every time I say it, like, people that hear it is like, they're shocked, but like the homeowner is like, no. Like, my kids are more important my grandkids are more important than money, right? And then they go the direction I want it to go, that they also wanted it to go, right? And so you can see here, we have the same frameworks, but we approach it slightly differently based off of personality. So that's the reason why we have, we just relaunched with objection-proof selling. You know, I think one of the things that's really important, we're talking about getting good in sales, is become objection-proof. And the way we do it is that we sell based off of frameworks. You know, we got the Vivid Selling Framework, which is a very large part of what we do as far as, our disruptors selling process. So we have that. We have matching the personality. And with the framework, we're dealing with the objections well before we go for the close.
Yeah.
Right. So if you guys are interested, go to objectionproofselling.com. From there, you can kind of see what our frameworks are. So just check it out. Right. And then definitely for sure, check out the Close More Sales podcast, because if you think Ian was impressive here or interesting or fascinating in any way whatsoever,
They definitely all thought that, all the things.
you get to hear it every week with the Close More Sales podcast. So was anything here we didn't cover that we wanted to make sure we touched on?
No, I mean, to reiterate your point about the personality thing, I tell everyone all the time, because I get asked a couple times, I've heard this maybe 3 or 4 times now, which is that I want to be like a mini version of you. I want to sell like you. And it's a very nice compliment, but the reality is it's almost the wrong thing, because I am me. I'm a very unique individual. I'm well aware of that. You call me crazy all the time for the amount of things I'm doing for different things. And I'm interesting, right? I mean, I'm my own guy.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say crazy. I would say I'm interesting.
I say insane.
But the real goal is not to sell exactly like me. It's to touch on all the features that I touch in terms of a framework, to take someone on the right emotional trajectory so that it feels like their idea, but to sell like you. Because if you are trying to sell in a way that's not how you are, and every professional salesperson, anyone who's ever done anything like this knows what this feels like, you are exhausted. You're burned out. You're trying to be something you're not. You're trying to have enthusiasm when you don't. You're trying to force someone who didn't want it. You're trying to do something that doesn't feel authentic to who you are.
Yeah.
And we would much rather have you sell how you are while touching all the points of a framework and dealing with the objections before they ever even become objections. It's the idea of objection proof, is that if you actually do this right, I don't hear the objection at the end of the sale. I'm just dealing with obstacles and then reframing them and moving them into the reason why you want to move forward anyway. And then you go, yeah, I guess that makes sense. And we just continue on. We are objection proof because it's not objection free. Everyone still throws out things that are reasons and hesitations to not move forward. But I don't hear them as objections when you follow our process, selling the way you could sell, because you dealt with them ahead of time. So by the time you reach the end, they just feel like, yeah, this is my conclusion. I want to move forward.
Yeah. And on top of that, like, some of their objections weren't really objections.
No.
They're really just like things that they'll say out of reaction.
Yeah.
They're not sure where they are, and then they'll just kind of say something to maybe throw you off your game. The example I've shared before is, my house isn't for sale, but they had submitted an inquiry to sell their house, right? So we just say, congratulations on the sale of your home. It's like, no, I haven't sold my home yet. Oh, but you were able to take care of that issue we were talking about before. No, I haven't. I don't understand. And I was like, well, here's what's going on. So they're still actually interested in selling a house. They just didn't want to talk about it at that moment.
Right.
Right. But a lot of people, when we hear an objection, we're just super curious. The way we approach that curiosity is maybe different,
Sure,
and counterintuitive, but we're exploring what everything means.
right.
Right. So yeah, again, guys, if you guys are interested, check out the Close More Sales podcast with Ian on iTunes, YouTube. And then, if you guys want to check out what we have to offer with objection proof selling, if you want to become objection proof, go to objectionproofselling.com. Anything you want to leave the listeners with?
Yeah, I'll say this. I'll wrap up this before you have your last line, which is like, I said it already before, but if you have conversations where how well you speak determines how much money you can make, you are in a sales role in some way, shape, or form. So you want to be strategic and you want to be intentional about selling the right way so that the people you are speaking to don't feel forced, they don't feel pushed, they don't feel coerced, they don't feel resentful, and you don't burn yourself out in trying to move someone through that process. So if you want help with that, just go to objectionproofselling.com. We'd be happy to have a conversation with you and see if we can help you out.
All right, perfect. Thank you guys for watching. See you guys next time.
Shout out to Steve Train. Jump on the Steve Train. Disruptors.